anyone like to come up for a story this morning? Hi, Hannah. How are you? Are you awake? Yeah. Hi, Theo. Hi, Simone. Freya's not sure, Hannah. That's okay. Sometimes she'll come. Last week, two of you were here, and last week I told this story. Remember the first day, the second day, the third day, the fourth day. And how our great grandparents understood how the earth came to be and how the world came to be. And the most important thing about that story is that God was in the story. Well, this morning I'm going to tell you this story up the center. This story, which is how today in our time we understand how this wonderful earth came to be. And the neat thing about this is that both of these stories start exactly the same way. They start with nothing. I wonder what nothing looks like. Yeah, I wonder.
Just everything black.
Everything black? Except black is something. This was nothing except there was God. Somehow in the nothing. And then I have in here a story that is 14 billion years old. And I'm going to tell you this story. And so from the nothing, all of a sudden, there was in one little tiny moment, a bang! And all of a sudden, all this energy, this light just started oozing out from nothing in every direction, faster than we can imagine. It oozed out just like this little piece of bead here. And out of all of that light and that energy, all of a sudden, galaxies were formed. Huge. We can't even imagine how big they were, but these galaxies were formed. And in those galaxies, there were millions, billions, trillions, gazillions of stars. And one star is our sun.
Oops, I forgot this.
The sun that is shining on us in this moment, that warms, that helps things to grow, that keeps us from getting cold. And out of all of the dust of this time, which was over billions of years, one day our planet was formed out of stardust. And after a time, a meteor hit our planet and knocked off a big chunk of it that became our moon. And there's our moon, which we see at night, and it goes around the earth. Well, when the earth was first made, it was just red hot molten lava. But eventually it started to cool and water formed. And water covered the whole planet. And then in that water, after millions of years, bacteria started to grow. Little tiny, tiny buggy things that are so small you need a powerful microscope to see them. And millions and zillions of them were in the water. And as they continued and developed, they started to grow into creatures like jellyfish. And then after a time, they started to grow shells. And you know why they grew shells? Because they were eating each other. And so the shells were to keep them safe. They had a place to hide from each other so they didn't eat each other. And then out of those, after even more time, fish started to appear. And then, as we moved on, the water, the land that was cooling under the water started to rise up, and we had land appear. So it wasn't just water, there were islands of land. And with that, some of the creatures from the sea, started to live on the land, like frogs and little lizards, amphibian kinds of things. And at the same time, the best thing happened. Insects were born. Insects that flew and insects that crawled, insects that swam. Insects became part of that world. And then after another bit of time, we started to see grasses and trees as the whole earth started to produce plants. And when the plants were big enough, the lizards grew into dinosaurs. Huge, big dinosaurs. And for at least 1 million years, dinosaurs were everywhere on the earth. Everywhere. You couldn't go anywhere without seeing them. And at the same time, we got strange creatures in the sea. Great, big, some of them were even bigger than whales are now, that began to grow in the seas. And then, one day, a huge meteor hit the earth again, just like the one that had created the moon. And this one caused the earth to go dark and cold, and all of the dinosaurs died. But some of the creatures, like turtles, survived. And some of the little tiny mammals. Do you know that in this time, just around the dinosaur time, horses were this tall? They were. They were only that tall. And wolves were about that tall. But with the dinosaurs gone, there was room for them. And so zebras and leopards and elephants and mammoths all started to live on the land. And then after an even longer time, we started to have monkeys and gorillas and orangutans. And at the same time as that, flowers and weeds and other kinds of plants we could eat started to grow. And then, all of a sudden, out of all of this before it, came us, humans. And humans discovered fire. And fire allowed them to stay warm. They didn't have to move all the time. It allowed them to cook food. And they started to form communities. And one of the things they did is they took the wild animals and they made them into pets, like dogs and cats and horses that were now much bigger than they were in the dinosaur days. And then they started to move into villages and towns and cities. And this special necklace was made for me, so after that, there's my name. But it represents all of us now, today, because we're part of all of this story. And the very last bead question mark. I wonder what comes next. That story right there is 14 billion years old. I wonder what bead you like the best. You. Yeah. Yeah. So the horse is your favorite, because this was yours, wasn't it? Yeah. What's your favorite bead? Yeah. On here. Is there something that you really like on here? The water ones? Yeah, those are pretty neat, aren't they? How about you, Simone? The shell? Yeah. Well, that's our new great story. This is a story that we're going to be hearing about a lot for a time. And I think you're going to get a chance to make your own story necklace, which sounds really cool. So we're going to sing, because in all of this, at every one of these points, God is in this story. God is part of this. And so we're going to sing Like a Rock, and then you can go and start on your story necklaces.